Notting Hill Carnival, Europe's largest street festival. It's a huge-scale cultural juggernaut, reflecting Caribbean tradition shaped by black British culture. Over 1 million people from all over the world invade this small corner of West London at the end of the summer for a teeming 2-day party on some of the most expensive streets in Britain. So where did this event come from? Who started Carnival and when? In this film, I'm on a mission to find out. My name is Wyn Baptiste, and I have a special interest because I always thought my dad started Carnival.
Carnival Development Committee.
My father was Selwyn Baptiste, a steel pan player from Trinidad who came to Britain in 1960. As a kid in the 1970s, I remember him running Carnival from his front room, and it was always my dad who was spokesperson when Carnival was on TV.
And here, with the Carnival Committee's point of view, is Selwyn Baptiste.
The Notting Hill Carnival began in the mid-60s and arose out of adventure playgrounds of the Tavistock and Goulburn areas. Its purpose is to bring a little bit of heaven to the desolate streets of North Kensington and to enable the West Indian community to feel at home in a country to which they are historically and spiritually tied.
Arguments over the origin of Carnival have been rumbling in Notting Hill for some time. I've heard about a woman called Claudia Jones, a political activist and civil rights campaigner who staged indoor carnivals elsewhere in London as early as 1959. Then there was Ronnie Laslett, a community worker in Notting Hill, who had the vision of bringing people together with a street festival in the mid-1960s. And Russell Henderson, who's said to have led the first procession in the streets with a steel pan hung around his neck. So where does my dad fit into all this? Not only are there rival versions of who started Carnival, no one can even agree when it started.
It was 1965.
1966.
Oh, whether it's 65 or 66 is neither here nor there.
59 or 64 or 65. Everybody needs to be recognized.
Claudia Jones.
Mr. Russell Henderson.
Ronnie Laslett.
You see the steel band that woman just mentioned, right? Which was started by Selwyn Baptiste.
This community has created Carnival. And rather than be like crabs in a barrel and pull each other down, it's about time the community starts working together, document its history, be proud of that history, and let the world know what Notting Hill's put on.
Ishmael Blagrove is a photographer, a researcher, a filmmaker, and has spent a long time looking into the origins of Carnival and collecting the most amazing array of photographs charting its history, and I'm hoping that he'll be able to tell us a little bit about the characters and controversies of this story. I recognise one of the pictures over here. I definitely recognise...
You should, it's your dad.
I recognise that man.
Yeah. So, Dad, I mean, Selwyn was a very, very important player, a very key and instrumental player in the history of Carnival. I mean, in fact, he took over the Carnival from Ronnie Laslett. He was also sort of training a lot of the kids in the area to play steel pan, and so he was working out the Warnington Road Adventure Centre, whilst Ronnie Laslett obviously had Shantytown. Two of the sort of key youth adventure playgrounds in the area that were instrumental.
So my dad took over Carnival from Ronnie Laslett, and they were both involved in playgrounds in the neighbourhood. But what about the date?
There was no event in 1964. Nothing happened in 64. There's absolutely no documentary evidence whatsoever. However, Ronnie Laslett herself says that the Carnival first started in 1965. You have others now who corroborate that. It might be fair to say that prior to the 1966 event, which was a larger, better organised event, there was a precursor event.
Have you got a sense of why history of Carnival has been so controversial, if you like, and has stirred up such kind of fervent passion amongst people?
Claudia Jones is one of my heroes, without doubt. I mean, what she contributed to sort of the black political struggles in this country is amazing. However, she did not start the Notting Hill Carnival. But then we have the situation of Ronnie Laslett, a white woman. Do you mean, what she know about Carnival? Do you mean, the reality was that you had these people from Trinidad who weren't just small-time carnivalists from Trinidad. They were big players, you know. They would have turned any little street jump up into a carnival. And so that's why people try and push Ronnie Laslett out by saying that, well, Ronnie staged the event, but we were the ones that made it.
Ronnie Laslett worked tirelessly to improve social conditions in an area which back then was severely deprived. But did she actually create the first carnival? Ronnie passed away in 2002, so I've come to see her son Mike Laslett to ask him. When your mother had a vision of bringing together this community, was there any feeling at that point that Caribbean culture should be at the centre of this?
No. No. My mother's thing was pretty much it was going to be just here, spilling out of the house into the street, just like a party for the gold, the Queen's Jubilee or something,
What year was that?
65. The reason there is this controversy is that all historians rely on documentary evidence. They want something written down somewhere. When my mother did this thing, it wasn't, there was no sense of it being a historic moment. There was no sense, we've got to write this down, we've got to record this. They just happened,
Your mum's plaque is just over here.
Yeah.
The mere fact that it's there must give you some form of satisfaction.
It's good, yeah, only because that one's there. Then that one, it's balanced. I mean, there should be one for your father up here somewhere, probably.
So talking to Mike Laslett, you really got a sense there was no real plan for making a huge event in that first little fete or fair, as it was. And Mike Laslett, son of Ronnie Laslett, thinks there might even be space for a blue plaque for my dad somewhere on the wall, not far from his mum's blue plaque. That's quite nice. A blue plaque on a wall in Notting Hill? Maybe Dad would have liked that. And then there's a section in this book, Pioneers in Great Britain, and at the beginning of the chapter, here's Sterling Betancourt and Russell Henderson. And then the next entry is Wyn Baptiste. His greatest contribution was that he played a major role by the mid-60s by actually teaching the steel pan to deprived children, English and Caribbean, from the Notting Hill Adventure Playground area. In the process, Baptiste literally turned many young lives away from violence and crime to become hard-working and upright citizens of Great Britain. He was also the first chairman of the Notting Hill Carnival. And my dad used to carry this book around and he used it as a bit of a calling card. If he went to see someone official, like a doctor or somebody where he needed to prove his credentials, he'd often pull this book out and get them to read that entry. And there's something that makes me feel a little sad about that, because I think part of my dad's story is that he felt he didn't have the standing or the recognition that his work had deserved. The adventure playgrounds were really important in the mid-60s because Notting Hill was a community still scarred by the race riots of 1958. To understand how that relates to the beginning of Carnival, I've come to meet Peter Joseph, a man who experienced those riots firsthand.
The Teddy Boys were a little bit... they kept away from us in the Grove until they were wound up by Oswald Mosley. And it spilled over in September the 1st. There was only about 60, 70 of us, but we held the Grove.
Peter was on the front line in Notting Hill, defending against racist attacks back in '58. But what does he know of the start of Carnival?
My recollection is quite simple. 1965, can't remember the month, but a friend of mine called me and said, pan on the road, Russell and Sterling and them, pan on the road. He just took the kids and all of that for a runs. We are in a position where we have human archaeologists right here, men like Russell and Sterling, who can tell you exactly what has happened and make sure that the actual truth comes from that, because they did it, nobody else.
The cry "pan on the road," meaning that a steel band was on the move on the streets, is key. That was the moment a street party became a procession. Peter is clear that his fellow Trinidadian pan players, Russell Henderson and Sterling Betancourt, were crucial characters. But what about my dad's involvement in Carnival?
He was an aspiring pseudo-intellect whose self-delusion and ambitions, whatever, put him to the front in order for him to feed.
Is it safe to say that you and my dad didn't really get on?
Well, it's not safe. You can be sure, because I didn't find him a nice man.
I knew my dad could be difficult, but it was hard for me to hear what Peter had to say. I've arranged to see my dad's old friend Darcus Howe to see how he reacts to the accusation that my dad used Carnival for his own ends.
What? He had a basement flat in Powell Square. What are they talking about? That is poison. He may have been, well, not to me, very harsh and very vicious, because he was surrounded by a lot of hustlers. And that he was not, because I knew him well. He was an intellectual. He was an artist. He was spiritual. And he was brave.
And in the mid-70s, both my dad and Darcus needed to be brave. Attendance numbers at Carnival were pushing 250,000. Between 1973 and 75, a man called Leslie Palmer was in charge, and he recruited more steel bands, introduced other live acts, and crucially attracted sound systems to the event. The Caribbean influence now went beyond Trinidadian tradition. But as more people came, police numbers rocketed. Tensions that were simmering between black youth and the police all year round boiled over at Carnival in 1976. By then, Darcus and Dad were running an event facing widespread calls to close it down, and they had to stand firm. They had a clear message for the police and Carnival goers.
There were too many policemen around the bands yesterday, and it created a certain amount of nervousness.
We say to the young blacks, if you steal in Carnival, it's like stealing from the purses of the guests who attended your big brother's wedding.
But looking back now, what's Darcus's take on who started Carnival?
So can you put the start of Carnival down to one individual, or is it a movement thing? I mean,
It's a movement thing. It's no one individual, nothing. It has to come from your own historical experience. You know, the only person who had that historical perspective on it, a fellow called Wyn Baptiste. For some reason, he knew that this thing is going to explode as a huge cultural statement.
But it didn't become a huge cultural statement overnight. It's time to rewind to where it all started for my dad. He's no longer here to tell me about the Notting Hill Adventure Playground, but I do have a recording he made a few years before his death.
These guys used to fight a lot, the black and white kids on the playground. I came in with pans, taught them. It was beneficial, it was unifying, it was all embracing, and the boys had a better understanding of one another.
I've managed to track down some of the original members of my dad's band, the Adventurers, and they've agreed to meet me at the playground where it all began for them when they were teenagers in the mid-60s.
You know, this place is completely changed to what I remember of it, and think very little now, you know, compare.
But it brings back memories being here.
It do.
Every child around, come here. The Adventure Playground at the time was famous.
Was it here that you guys were introduced to Pan?
Yes, right here.
Selwyn is like family, knew my family back to front.
Yeah.
So did it go beyond making and teaching Pan? Was it more than that?
Of course, it was a relationship. We in the band used to call Selwyn Pharaoh, because he was like the leader.
He was the leader.
So when the Adventurers first took to the streets in Carnival, would you be able to put a year to that?
We were the kids' band.
Basically, around 66, we would say.
The only thing is, I think Selwyn could have, in his lifetime, he deserved a bit more recognition.
He did not get the recognition that he rightfully deserved.
When the Carnival was in proper problem, Selwyn was the one who took the mantle. That's when the thing moved to his house. Because that's after, like, the police problem with the riots. The whole thing, he couldn't get away from it. When he had sleep deprivation because of the fact his house is the office 24 hours a day. What I always remember about Selwyn, he's on television, and when you look at him, he look like a black leader, militant leader with his afro. Because we was his boys, you know. We were Selwyn boys.
The adventurous steel band became the Metronomes, who are still going strong today. They practice all year round for the annual steel band competition, Panorama. Founder member Irvin Corridon is still involved. They still use my dad's pan in the band. They say it brought them luck last year. That luck, combined with skill and hard work, meant they came second, pipped to first place by the Real Steel Orchestra, a band from Plymouth. Still, it's their best placing in 20 years. Dad would be pleased, seeing the celebrations going on long into the night. My dad's band did remember being there in 1966, but can anyone put them and my dad at the first one? One man who should know is Sterling Betancourt. A legendary steel pan player, Sterling left Trinidad to come and perform at the Festival of Britain way back in 1951. And visiting him feels like I'm getting close to the source.
1951 Tasbo.
So this is the band you came over for the Festival of Britain?
That's right. And only 3 of us alive now.
Wow. Are you in that photograph?
Yeah, look me here. They said that we must take a band to Britain for them to see the Trinidad culture, because this was something new. No one knew about the steel drum in those days. And they say, well, that is black magic. I met your dad in the early days when we started the Notting Hill Carnival in that Adventure Playground. He was very involved with Mrs. Laslett as well, and the kids in the Adventure Playground. And he was there, but he didn't actually come on the road with us when we first started, but he was there. This was not a Trinidad, West Indian thing. It get like that after.
What year do you think the first... what year would you say that first carnival was?
1964.
Sterling, what was my dad like as a man, as a guy, as a friend of yours? How would you describe him?
Wyn Baptiste was a very passionate person, you know, and he used to get very upset if people try to do things that he's not agree with. He was a nice person, I must say. He was a very nice person.
Am I too old to learn?
No.
Can you teach an old dog new tricks?
Yeah, you want to have a go?
Okay, then why not?
Okay.
Dad started teaching me when I was a kid at school, and I was too interested in playing football.
Sterling clearly had fond memories of my dad, but according to him, it was the band he was in, the Russell Henderson Trio, who took to the streets first. My dad's band came later.
Just one hand or two on those notes?
You could 2 here and 2 here.
In trying to find out who started Carnival and when, I've been looking for definitive answers, and all roads have led to this man.
Russell Henderson, musician and pioneering pan artist, led the first ever carnival parade on the streets of Notting Hill in 1965.
They put 65 and 64. That's what they
Russell Henderson is now 90, but he remembers how that first mobile procession, spontaneous, unplanned, momentous, created an immediate buzz as it set off through the streets.
So there was no intention for this event to move, you just came to play at this spot?
No, there was no intention to come to play on that spot.
Do you remember which direction you went in?
Towards Portchester Hall.
That way, let's go.
Within a few hundred yards, people were coming in and falling. But it was so impressive, that first one, that following, that it caused it to continue. And the same way that built up that day, the carnival built up every year. And your father came to me and said, Russ, you realize this carnival is something getting big, getting out of hand. He said, I think we should have a committee. I said, oh, no, I agree with it. And your father, Selwyn, formed the first committee. We call it CDC, Carnival Development Committee.
So according to Russell, that's when things got serious. My dad's no longer here to give his version of events, but Sterling, Russell and some of the other old steel pan warriors are. And they still get together to jam and reminisce about how they, and others like them, changed the face of Britain. When was the first carnival? Well, that one will run and run. When you ask who started it, the answer is that Carnival has many authors. At the forefront, a dynamic white woman working to bring an impoverished community together, and a group of pioneering West Indian musicians who answered her call. A set of conditions including deprivation, immigration and racial tension set the stage. Hundreds of people have helped develop Carnival and millions have danced to its tune over the years. I've learnt a lot about my dad and his Carnival story, and over the August bank holiday, I'm sure he'll be here in spirit.
This is designed for people of the world. You participate, it's a street theatre. You can be anything on that day. It's free, it's a freedom thing. And the Carnival is the most dynamic thing that England has ever seen in its history.